again by Benning. Darnell Nurse left it in the corner, gets up center. Perry scores! Corey Perry!
Lilia able to shake away from Solani. It's given away to Solani around in front. Score! Teemu Solani with the steal.
Perry and the fans want one. Score! Off the floor! On the board! Paul Kariya!
All right. We made it.
Oh, we did. We're back.
Yeah. I was waiting for you to say something, to do your usual intro,
Uh-huh.
but then I didn't want to leave it too long.
You didn't trust me to not just let it drag on?
No. I was expecting long silence for 30 seconds. So
That's fair. I can't say I blame you for that. I can't say I blame you. So, how was your Thanksgiving a month ago?
what do you like? I don't understand the timing for American Thanksgiving. Like, it makes so much more sense in the middle of October, separated from all the rest of the other
I'm sorry.
holidays.
Are you saying that a very ridiculous and arbitrary holiday has a appropriate
Yes.
timing?
Yes. After Halloween is only Christmas. Anything after Halloween.
That's an insane thing to say. The buffer that Thanksgiving provides between the indulgence and the excesses of Halloween and Christmas is so wonderful.
No. I like it. I like it where it is here. You get
That's crazy. That's
Yeah,
an
you-
insane take. Like, you could put it anytime you want, except for the fact that, like, it's a harvest holiday, right? Like, that's essentially what it is.
yeah.
But
I
like,
don't know.
middle of October's absolutely not, bro.
And well, you know what? To be fair, I'm biased because it usually lands on and around my birthday, which usually means I get some sort of long weekend, 4-day weekend, right at my birthday. I've had a lot of 4-day weekends off school growing up due to Canadian Thanksgiving, so I am a little biased. I'm not gonna lie.
I don't get it, man. I think it's an insane take to say before Halloween.
No,
It's
but
not
like,
fucking cold enough for the food yet.
oh my god, it's not cold enough. Like, it gets cold at all there. She's like, look
You're
at my
proving
window.
my point. We don't fucking get it cold enough that we can just be like you people and just wear fur coats to the office in fucking July.
We're eating
You insane
Thanksgiving
people.
type food in like the end of August, early September, when the weather starts dipping down. So
You mean when the
we've
sun
been
comes,
living it.
when the sun starts to go away
Yeah.
for winter forever?
Yeah, we've been living it for a few months when we roll up to a middle of October Thanksgiving.
No, man, it's a for sure. Thanksgiving is a absolute you could talk me into like middle of November, but I am a big fan of trying to push Christmas off as long as possible as a what do you call it? As like a holiday season because people go fucking insane, bro.
If you walk into any store after Halloween and all the Christmas stuff is out already.
Yeah,
Like,
at
it's
least for
already-
Thanksgiving, it gives you like an extra week where they have to pretend to still sell things that look like turkeys or fucking
Yeah, but
gourds.
it's funny. Like, they will hold that on the shelves until that week, and then they'll clear some space out of the Christmas stuff for it, and then it's immediately gone the week
Insane.
after, and it's
It's
back.
awful.
It's back to Christmas. So
Absolutely insane. Anyways, what do you want to talk about?
well, I should have done a little more prep and gone back and. Did we not? I know we obviously did predictions for the entire season, but did we not kind of predict on how they would look after like 20 games? I think we did, or at least we had that conversation. So I'd love to go back and figure out what we said. It feels like right on par. Like, they're 10-10-3 after 23 games. That feels about where we thought they would be, I think. Or maybe I'm being optimistic. Maybe we were. I can't imagine we were much higher on them at this point on what we think they could be.
I mean, we did sit here. Let's be serious. We did sit here and extensively make the case for a version of this team that could compete.
Yeah.
And I would say to this point, this team has not looked competitive.
I
Taken
will
on the whole,
say,
this is not a season that I think anyone other than maybe Lucas Dostal should be particularly proud of. Troy Terry's playing well enough.
Yeah.
I mean, like I told you, I texted you, like I worked on some notes just to like get some
Yeah.
thoughts down. And one of the things I was gonna say is like he's 19 points, next closest is 12. Leads the team in assists, tied for the lead in goals. The only other forward I think you could maybe make the case for would be Leo Carlson, who I think has a bunch of game-winning goals.
Yeah, and he's missed some time. He's got 11 points in 20 games. So,
But like other than Troy Terry, I don't know that this team has anybody that can push Lucas Dostal. And when your goalie's your MVP, and you're still not even really a wild card team, that's when I think it's fair to say that nobody should be particularly proud of this season.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, the goaltending has carried the team. I think standings-wise, this is where we predicted they'd kind of be in around. You know, they have a couple games in hand on a few of the teams above them, so you win one of those, you're 3 points out of a wild card spot, essentially, in the West. So I think it's where we thought they would be, right? Is at least in striking distance of a wild card spot. The standings are fairly close to what we expected, other than Calgary being a little bit better than we thought they would be. Sharks are bottom. Seattle's down in the bottom half with us. Calgary's fifth, and then it's Edmonton, Vancouver, LA, Vegas as the top teams. So that kind of slots out the way we did. But yeah, it's underwhelming. I mean, they've started over the last 10 games to turn things around. Started 4-7-2. The last 10 is 6-3-1. But again, the main issue that has come to light for the Ducks this year is goal scoring is not there. They're 26 in goals for, 23rd in shots on goal, 28th in power play percentage, 26th in shooting percentage. So the offense isn't there. And when somebody is leading or tied for the team leading goals with 6 through 23 games, it's not the greatest look for how things are going offensively for the team. And then even defensively, you can't really say. I mean, the defense of the team stats defensively paint the picture that this has been all goaltending since the start of the season. The Ducks have the 9th fewest goals allowed, so they're in the top 10, but they've allowed the most shots on goal. They've allowed 33 shots on goal, or 33.4 shots on goal per game. Their penalty kill is ranked 25th. So
25th penalty kill, 28th power play. And if you're going to be a fucking drag at 5v5, then you need elite special teams, and they do not have elite special teams.
No.
All they have is an elite goalie and potentially another starting caliber goalie coming back off of injury. You know, so far in 6 games, John Gibson's been fucking awesome. He's got a .926 save percentage at 505. He's got a .902 high danger save percentage. You know, Dostal is 10th in the league with a .847 high danger save percentage, minimum of 500 time on ice, 500 minutes played. He's 10th out of 34 goalies who are basically full-time starters. That's not bad.
Yeah, three games where he's had to make 40 plus saves. Or I think actually, 3 games, and a couple of them he had 38, 39. So he's faced a lot of shots. Gibson's come back and helped. Obviously, Gibson missed the first part of the season. Dostal's played 15 of the games, and Gibson's played 6. I mean, this has the writing on the wall the way things look. That if and when, I would love for the goaltending to continue to be this great for the entire season, but there is a point where it's not going to be good. We've had games like that where like the goaltending just wasn't able to carry the Ducks through, and they've lost the game because the offense isn't there. But they're over a long stretch and over the next 60 games or 59 games in the season. More often than not, the goaltending isn't going to be able to bail the Ducks out as things kind of even out. So the goal scoring being where it is and still allowing the most shots on goal. This team hasn't gotten better defensively. They haven't gotten any better. Arguably, have gotten worse offensively. Yet somehow they have a 500 record. Something doesn't feel right about that, and obviously doesn't seem sustainable across an entire season. So it's a catch-22 because you look at the record and you say this is kind of where you hoped they'd be, is in striking distance of a wild card spot, but you know why they're there, and it's not sustainable long term.
I think, it's interesting. Like, compared to last season at 5-on-5, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Ducks' expected goals for percentage has gone down from 45.5 to 43 and a third.
Mm-hmm.
Their expected goals for has gone up, but so is their expected goals against. They went from a 2.25 goal expected goals to 2.5 expected goals for, and then they went from 2.7 to 3.2 and against. And I think that kind of highlights for me where we're at is you're starting to see the way players can fit into this team in the long term and how they can be useful and contributing. And at the same time, it's still very clear that this team has a really long way to go. And I think, at a certain point it becomes, is it the roster? Is it the coach? Is it both?
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know, man. I don't know how you wanted to go about this because it's been so long since we've been on.
Mm-hmm.
But like, has this little bit of Ducks wins where they've won 2 of their last 3, 5 of their last 8. Like, has that at all changed your opinion? Because I know we had talked earlier in the season about feeling like Cronin probably was getting close to needing to be moved on from.
No, it honestly hasn't. I mean, the games that they've won over the last stretch here are games that they should win, right? Like, they beat the Kraken 5-2. They beat Chicago 3-2, Detroit 6-4, Blue Jackets 4-2. The Stars beating them 4-2, that's a good win, right? But the other 4 are games that you should win. The Islanders 3-1, Sharks 3-1, Utah in overtime 5-4, and then the Sharks 2-0. Those are all their wins from this season so far. The majority of those are games you should win, right? Like, they're not against tough competition. The Stars is the only one you could really argue there, but beating the Sharks twice, beating Columbus, beating Chicago, beating the Kraken, beating the Sens in their last game, which they kind of just scraped by, and getting that game over the line. You come up next, you've got Vegas, then you've got the Wild, you've got Toronto coming up, Winnipeg, Colorado, Vegas again, Devils, Oilers. Like, those are games that are going to be tough, and the winnable games start running out fairly quickly. So I don't have any optimism for the rest of the season, because you look at things in a wider picture. It's just, we've seen this before, right? We've seen John Gibson play out of his mind at the Ducks start the season and either look very good or look just competent, and then the wheels fall off in January or February, and the Ducks are far, far, far out of a playoff picture. The only difference maybe now is they've got 2 goaltenders who look like they could be, or look like they are and have been, above average starter quality in the NHL. So maybe consistently you can still have good goaltending and be in that wild card picture by the end of the season. But it's kind of putting a band-aid over some of the issues and papering over some of the issues that this team has by just having good goaltending. The offense hasn't gotten better. A lot of the guys haven't stepped up defensively. This team doesn't play any better than they did last year, and like you said, the stats point to them playing worse. So then you start looking at the coaching staff and the players that they have, and is this really the group that you can go forward with and move to that next level? Because we were hoping, obviously weren't going to see everything pan out, and we weren't going to see everybody take steps forward, but to see almost nobody take a step forward this year, it's concerning. Like, Zellweger has been great, but again, him just playing consistently on a night-on-night basis is an improvement on last year, because he only played a handful of games for the Ducks. So the bar for him to improve on last year, it's not like it was set very high. It was just stick around the big club, and that's an improvement. Beyond that, I don't think Minchikov has looked better. I don't think Lacombe's looked better. I don't think, obviously Zegras or Cutter Gauthier and them have looked better. And Gauthier's bar is probably the same as Zellweger, just a bit more hype there and what we expected for him from the start of the season. So it's been a bit of a letdown in that sense, as we were hoping for some positive storylines to at least outweigh the bad. And really the only positive storyline for the Ducks so far is that Troy Terry is still pretty good, and the Ducks goaltending is very good, and it's carried them so far.
So, I want to talk about something.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to talk about two things at the same time. Do you think this team needs to go out and add someone special from outside of the organization?
I mean, yes, because we've been saying this, and anytime they've been linked to, an elite talent, when they have been, or at least somebody better, significantly better than who's on this roster that can make this roster. We've talked about Laine, we've talked about Marner, we've talked about a bunch of different names of guys that have been available at some point that ultimately haven't ended up coming over to the Ducks. They need that. They need a shakeup. They need a change. It's something big. It can't be a small move like we've seen over the last couple of years. The small moves here and there by Pat Verbeek, and some again, bringing in Vetrano is, I think, panned out. Ryan Strome is not bad. It's a decent move, but
Ryan Strome is playing well this year.
Yeah, none of them just really move the needle to the point where the management is taking a swing to try and really shake things up. We haven't got to that point yet. I feel like we should, are well past needing to be at that point now. But what are the options, right? Like we still talk about Mitch Marner, and that situation still has to be resolved at some point. But what
Real
is
quick,
that?
before we get into particulars of players, let me ask you this question of a particular on the other end.
Mm-hmm.
Is it time to look at maybe moving on from... Let me say it this way. Is it time to maybe think about using Mason McTavish as the trade chip to go out and get somebody?
I don't think anybody should be safe at this point beyond Leo Carlsson and I guess Cutter Gauthier, because again, Cutter Gauthier in the sense that you've just acquired him and he needs a little bit more time, and Leo Carlsson because you've just drafted him at such a high position and he's played well and it looks like they want to build around him. Beyond that, like, tell me anybody else that really should be safe on this team.
Minchikov and Zellweger.
Yeah, and that's fair. I think you could say that. You can make the same argument for Carlsson and Gauthier in a sense, and Zellweger's played well enough. But the list is small.
Dostal.
Yes, yeah.
Because
but that leaves some guys on the list that we've in the past said there's no way you should move these guys, but all of a sudden it becomes a real conversation. We talk about Zegras and McTavish.
I was going to say, which is really, we're talking about one particular guy, which is Trevor Zegras. And
yeah, I think McTavish is in there too, for sure.
But McTavish hasn't been a part of these conversations at all in the past.
No.
I have even, like, before when we were on Twitter, I had made comments about moving on from McTavish. And Cam Robinson of Elite Prospects replied and just said, no. Do not move on from Mason McTavish. Right? Don't, like, and these was like hypothetical, like, what about moving McTavish to Vancouver for Elias Pettersson type trades? And he's like, don't, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just wonder. Sorry, let me say this. So that's all new, I think, right? I don't think that's anything that's actually, like, really been talked about in a sense because he's still young, he's still on his ELC, etc. We're really talking about Trevor Zegras. Mm-hmm. I still don't see the value in trading him.
Yeah,
I think that there are
caliber
of players out there who you can trade him for, and I will be okay with it.
Yeah.
But I will die on the hill that he should be a really special player in this league.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm still there with that, yeah.
So for me, it's him, Leo, Cutter, Pavel, Zellweger, Dostal.
Mm-hmm.
6 guys. Everybody else. And I think it comes down to a very important question. And then I'll shut up and I'll let you talk. Do you think it is either add a player to help you really go for it or trade Troy Terry. Do you think you have to pick one or the other?
So like adding a player and
So
not
either
trading Troy Terry or moving Troy Terry. You only like you can't do both. Is basically what you're saying.
yes.
Yeah, I would think so. I think that the real question is I think you almost killed two birds with one stone. Both get solved in that equation. Like adding a real impact player might also mean Troy Terry is one of the pieces that goes back the other way.
If you move Troy Terry, you're getting younger, I assume.
Yeah, yeah. And that's when we get into particulars and you talk like a Mitch Marner or something like that. Now, I don't know how. I know Mitch Marner's not significantly younger than Troy Terry, but that's what you're looking to do at that point. Because whatever team you're most likely getting this player from, too, is not going to be just looking for Mason McTavish as the headlining piece. And I don't think he can be that anymore. I think he's a significant piece of any trade, but to go out and get somebody of that caliber, teams are going to want a close to same level type player in return that's still relatively young that they can add to their roster. So I think Troy Terry kind of fits that perfectly because he's right below that threshold, right, where they can still put him in their team and they know he's going to be a 50-60 point guy and make their team better at all ends. And then you supplement that with a McTavish or picks or other prospects that the Ducks have in their system. So I think when you're hunting for that type of player, if a deal like that gets done, I think it more than likely involves Troy Terry. I can't imagine a world where it didn't, because I don't think any of these teams would strictly look at picks and prospects.
Well, so I would say that I think the Troy Terry thing solves itself because if you're adding a player in that 23 to 27 range, you keep Troy Terry.
Yeah.
If you're moving Troy Terry, you're moving him to a team that is trying to basically do the opposite of what you're doing, which is add that guy in that 23 to 26 range.
Yeah.
The team I think about with him is Buffalo.
And bringing back
Zach Benson, Jordan Greenway, maybe try to get, one of the other shooters like Quinn or something like that. But now what you've done is you've added, him to Tuck and Cousins, and so now what you're saying is we've got this team locked in for this long, right? That gives you him, Tage, and Cousins all making $7 million for the next forever. Like that's your core, just done. You've still got young players who are coming along. You still have picks, things like that. The other trade that I keep thinking about, and I've said this one before, so it's not new. McTavish, Luneau, and next year's first round pick, probably plus something else, for Charlie McAvoy.
Yeah, Boston's got to figure out what they're going to do soon because they're in a tough situation with how things have gone for them this year. They've started to slowly turn it around. They're third in the Atlantic. They've got enough talent to do well, but there's a lot of holes in that team. So I don't know. What's McAvoy's contract situation looking at right now? Is he in line for an extension anytime soon?
Let's look. I think he's got a few more years left. He's got 6 more years left at $9.5 million, or 5 years after this one.
Okay. Yeah.
So he's up the summer of 2030. He's a free agent, and he'll be. He's going to be 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32. So you basically get him for Devin Taves. You get him from 27 to 32 because he'll be 27 in a couple weeks. You get him in the Devin Taves thing.
He makes that team a lot better. Yeah, it's a move to make the Ducks better because, like you said, you're not moving Troy Terry in that deal. You're moving out some of the younger pieces. You get better.
Maybe you move on from like a Ryan Strome, just for because look here, they don't have to take. Yeah. They don't have to move Cap out, but to make maybe they put like a Vetrano in that or something to like help increase the you know what I'm trying to say.
I know what you're saying,
fundamentally, it is a top 6 center and a top 3 defenseman prospects for a number 1 defenseman right now. If you do that and you're them, I think you kind of, because that's a weird one. Just because of all the Swayman stuff and all that. But it's just very interesting to me, I think.
Yeah, I'm be interested
the other guy
to see
would be Brady Tkachuk.
I've heard rumors or like speculation surrounding it. I've never looked into it. What is the whole situation with Brady? Is it revolving around a contract extension or Ottawa just being bad? Like, what's the whole reasoning for him even being in these discussions of leaving Ottawa?
So I think,
'Cause
from what I understand,
yeah, he's
is,
locked down for the next 3,
Mhm.
4 years. Yeah.
as far as I know, what was I listening to the other day? But basically, Brady Tkachuk is maybe the only player Ottawa isn't actively shopping, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody else is kind of calling, and you probably include Jake Sanderson, Matt. You probably figure those are the two guys, and
Tim
Stützle.
Stützle, yeah.
But apparently, they could be willing to listen to pretty much anybody.
Makes sense, yeah. That's fair.
After Matt Tkachuk left Calgary for Florida by wanting to go home to a United States team, it immediately all the attention turned to Brady.
Right.
Is
That
he
makes
going to want to
sense.
do this? Is he going to want to do the same thing?
That's fair, yeah.
So I think, people are looking at him as like.
He's 25 now, so it's
It's
how
like, here's
much,
the question, right? Can Brady Tkachuk be the best player on your team? I think the answer is pretty clearly no.
Mhm.
Right? And that's kind of the problem that they've had, is he's kind of been the best player on their team. You had the one Tim Stützle season, but I would say, Brady Tkachuk was probably still a better player overall, despite production.
Mhm.
And like, if he's the best player on your team, you have to ask tough questions. If he comes to Anaheim, I don't think he's the best player on the team. He might technically be like the most realized player right now, but I still think within a year or two, Leo Carlsson and Pavel Mintyukov are both easily better.
I wonder how that would look. I mean, Ottawa offensively has been fairly good, top 10 in the league, but it's defensively they're not great. Their big acquisition of Allmark has been hit or miss, and then just defensively as a team they don't have enough. It'd be one of those things. Brady would have to make it very clear that he wants
Did
to
you do
go.
McTavish for Brady?
Yeah. Oh yeah. 1-for-1. Yeah, it would never happen. That's the thing.
What do you think you have to add to get Brady?
Because
Because
it's
if you're
so
Ottawa,
tough.
then you
'Cause,
basically say we're going Stützle McTavish down the center for the next 10 years.
yeah, with the whole Brady situation, it's so tough to determine what it would cost to get him, because it's similar to the Matthews situation in the sense that he would have to ask for a trade out of Ottawa, and then that's
No, you can just go get these guys. Wayne Gretzky didn't ask out. He got traded.
I just don't think
these
they
dudes
have.
can go.
I don't think they move him unless they have a feeling that he's not going to want to stay there.
Or if they just, I mean, yeah, I guess. I get what you're saying, but I also think that there is a time and place where it's like, it is easy, or not easy, but it is meaningful to talk yourself out of being complacent. Again, if you're fucking Toronto, or if you're a Canadian team, right? How do you not look at the Kawhi Leonard trade and go, that's the type of thing that rewards Canadian franchises? Making these big trades. Like, how do you not look at that and go, yeah, all we got to do, like, because again, like, DeMar DeRozan, best player in the history of Toronto. Like, but they were like, nah, man, we got to move this dude fucking right now. How long did they hold on to fucking wrong with Jason Spezza, and it led to fucking nothing?
Yeah.
Again, you're right. And that all of the hockey sense in me says that is not the type of player you move on from. That is not the type of player teams move on from traditionally. But there's also a part of my brain that says, if you want to make fucking shit happen, there's a world in which you can go get him. Maybe it's the same as what I was saying for, McAvoy, where we're going to give you a right shot defenseman and top six center. Because, now you're looking at, like, they can go Shabbat and Sanderson and fucking Luneau and Jakubchuk. And I'm like, okay, that works. Like, there's a world out there where you can make these things happen, and I think sometimes the NHL can lack imagination.
How long do you think Matt Barzal holds out in New York? I know he's hurt right now, but
I mean, I think the answer to that question is when do they fire Lou?
Yeah.
As long as Lou is there, they're not trading anybody who can help them win games. Because if that was the thing, I'd call it about Noah Dobson tomorrow. Tell me Noah Dobson doesn't round out this defense core nicely.
Yeah.
Probably cost a pretty penny. He's only 24 years old.
It's going to cost them a pretty penny in the summer, too. He's a penny RFA, so.
But, like, boy, you know, if the Ducks finish with, like, the 9th pick, that pick and Tristan Luneau for Noah Dobson, I can see that trade.
Yeah, it feels like right now, like, the options the Ducks have had in the past to go out and get a player that can make an impact from the guys. Recently, we've talked about our Line A and Netchas in the summer. There's not a bunch of those options available right now. Like, the one that always still pops out to me is the situation at least has to be resolved is Mitch Marner, right? Like, that situation has to be resolved at some point. But, you know, just going through divisions, look at the rest of the teams like Ottawa, the Brady Tkachuk situation is possible, but there has to be some sort of change from what's happening right now for that to, if everything goes status quo, he stays in Ottawa, right? So there has to be some sort of change from the team or the player for that to really move forward. Montreal, Detroit, Buffalo, I don't think any of them are looking to move out. Any players of significant level, like Alex DeBrincat at this point, I don't see any point in going and revisiting that. You just go down the list.
So you just think the number of young players available are limited?
Yeah, like at the impact level that we're talking about to really make a difference and shake things up and.
So, to that point, we would say then I think that leaves two options for how to deal with this team. One is to change the coach. And two is to go out and make a splashy, though inexpensive, trade. Two players specifically that come to mind for me are Steven Stamkos and Erik Karlsson, where you can go out and get them and it won't cost you as much as it probably would feel like it should because they're those players, because they're on big contracts, they are underperforming. But basically what you do is you bring them into a new environment, hope you get more out of them, and that they come in and provide something that maybe isn't in the room or on the ice, especially in the case of Steven Stamkos. You're looking at a high-end goal scorer who hasn't played well. Maybe he gets reinvigorated, something like that, right? Obviously the risk there is that they're just absolutely cooked and you're on the books for that contract for the rest of it, which is not good.
Yeah.
Would you rather make a trade or would you rather fire the coach?
I'd rather fire the coach at that point. Like we've had these conversations offline about some of those trades, and I feel like unless you're actively attempting to make this team younger or shake something up at a significant level, adding a older player like an Erik Karlsson or a Steven Stamkos is. I don't see the entire logic behind it at this point. I get it makes the team better in the short term. I get can help you turn things around, but I don't think it does enough that it makes the Ducks competitive. And I think it stirs things up a little bit in the short term, but when you look at it long term, you'll just wonder why they gave up the assets for this guy when it didn't pay dividends for them in terms of actually being competitive and making a playoff run. So I see the logic. Ducks need to add cap space. It does make them better in the short term, but for me, I'd rather fire the coach, see if you can bring a new coach in and get the best out of some of the young players you have now, and then find a way to make that big splash while making this team younger at the same time. And again, the options for that are limited. Exclusively again to Mitch Marner. I don't have a lot of names, if any, on the list of, at least at this point in time, of other guys you could go out and acquire to do that. Like, I think ultimately Colorado figures out a way to keep Mikko Rantanen there. I can't picture a world where they lose him for nothing, and that he leaves Colorado. And then, Elias Pettersson's situation seems to be that he's going to be staying in Vancouver. So beyond that, you don't have a lot of options to do that. So you've got to hope the guys that you have drafted at this point can turn it around and improve. And I think a lot of that starts with the coach. And clearly at this point, it just doesn't seem like it's working. So I would still wait for the right candidate to come available. I don't think with what's out there right now that's the case, but when it does, they need to act fast because We've said this since the beginning. We don't think Cronin was going to be the guy. We hoped he would, but it felt like more of an interim for the time being type hire. So we're still waiting for that guy to come available. But when he does, and when there is a suitable candidate we think can actually take this team to the next level, the Ducks got to move fast and pull. What was the team that recently just did that? Fired their coach and hired another one immediately.
St. Louis.
St. Louis, yeah. So
Hired Montgomery.
yeah. So yeah, that's what I'd be looking to do at this point. I don't like making a trade just to make a trade unless it's one that's gonna shake things up at a significant level.
Do you think Matt McIlvaine deserves a serious look? Or do you think he's only had, this would be his second season as the AHL head coach?
Yeah, and from what again, I'm not going to sit here and say I've watched a ton of goals games, but the success really hasn't been there. I think I'm looking now, they're 4-12-1, 4-12-2 this season. They weren't great last year either, and I know a lot of that has to do with the talent that they have available to them, a lot of young players, a lot of rookies as well, but he might get a chance depending on when Cronin goes as
An interim?
But then you're having to shake things up down at that level too. So I think with Cronin specifically, it's whenever he does go, it's in tandem with somebody that they want coming available. I can't. For me, it's one very bad run, which is likely going to come at some point this season.
Ooh,
away
boy,
from
Eddy.
What?
Games 41 through 46. At St. Louis, at Philadelphia, at Carolina, at Washington, at Tampa, at Florida.
Yeah, I mean that could
Boy,
be
that could
right?
get a coach fired.
Yeah, at that stage in the season, if you're still floating or just below 500, losing 6 games on the hop on the road is going to take you square out of any sort of contention at that point. So, yeah, I mean that could be it. You're waiting for teams like Pittsburgh to decide what they're doing, Nashville decide what they're doing. So like Sullivan and Brunette deciding if they're going to continue on or if they're going to get rid of those guys. Colorado at some point, right? I doubt they move on from Bednar, but it's a situation you monitor, right, to see. They haven't had the best start to the season, so is that a possibility? So I think those are 3 guys you look at, monitor that situation, see what comes from that. I think one of them ends up losing their job at some point just after Christmas if results don't start going their way. I think probably the Nashville situation is a little bit hotter than the other ones, with Andrew Brunette having a lot of pressure on the off-season moves that they made, and the fact that they're 7-12 right now, that he could find his way out the door fairly quickly, and that's a guy I would hop on immediately and make something happen. Sullivan's probably next on the list of most likely of those 3 to go. But he's got a lot of stock built up with the past success he's had in Pittsburgh and the fact that this team, no matter how bad they are trying to win now with Sid. I don't think they're going to move guys out. I think they're going to still do whatever they can to win. And I don't think moving Mike Sullivan out to bring in who at this point makes sense for them at least at this point in time. So I think Andrew Burnett's probably the most likely one, but we'll see, man. It's a weird situation. It doesn't feel like he's on the hot seat, at least from anything that's coming in and being reported. But like you'd mentioned, they're one bad stretch away from that becoming a real possibility.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess, a big part of it for me is we've talked about, right? Like, there's just, I don't know, man. I'm trying to figure out how to say it, but I guess the best way to say it is just like you said it perfectly earlier. I don't feel like anybody has gotten better beyond getting older.
Yeah.
I thought Jackson Lacombe looked really good at the beginning of the year, especially in the preseason. He looked really, really strong. Since then, I'm not sure he's looked as strong as the season's gone on. He's had some nice plays. He's had some lapses, which is fine. He's young. The team isn't great, but like, the actual goals against for the team are down since last year, but that is almost entirely and quite obviously due to exceptional goaltending.
Yeah.
The fact that the underlying numbers say that they should be giving up more goals is extremely concerning. I think the team feels good about this win streak. I think Troy Terry after the Ottawa game made the comment that like he feels like now they have an identity to play within and they're happy about that. I don't know that I know what that identity is yet. In the games that I have seen, I'm not convinced that this team really knows what they're supposed to be doing. And I don't see who on this team has made a marked improvement over last year that isn't Lucas Dostal.
Yeah, I don't see anybody barring like a few games on the hop here and there where guys have stood out and looked good. It's just been a lot of inconsistency. Like Zegras into the last 2 games for a 5-game stretch there had points in 5 straight. He looked really good. Looked like he was starting to get things going, and then it tails off. Cutter Gauthier for a handful of games here and there has looked really good, and there's games where he's disappeared. The same can be said for pretty much everybody on this roster other than the goaltenders and maybe Troy Terry, right? Like he's at least been consistently going, but it's a point here, a point there, a multi-point effort every now and then. It's not outstanding. It's just better than the rest of the team by a pretty wide margin at this point. I've liked Leo Carlsson in pretty much every game he's played in, but he can't be asked to carry this team at this point. 11 points in 20 games is good. If he finished with 50 points, you'd probably say that's a good improvement for him and a nice step in his development, but that's one guy. And that's disappointing when you've got a lot of young players in this team, and you were looking for guys like Zegras and McTavish and Cutter Gauthier and Jackson Lacombe and others to Minchikov to take steps forward, and they haven't. That's certainly concerning at this point, and that's it's sad because that was the one thing we're asking for is like, listen, the results cannot be there. That's kind of expected at this point, but to at least see a few of these guys take major steps forward, that would be something to look forward to, and to really have nobody to kind of hold on a pedestal and say these guys are taking major steps forward. That's the most disappointing part of this season so far, beyond Lucas Dostal, who's been great, and it's great to see him taking over and showing he can be a starting netminder, but to not have that in the rest of the team with really anybody, it's disappointing. It's disappointing. So I mean, we still have plenty of hockey to go. We can see some of these guys turn around. A lot of them are young, so there's 59 games to go where we can see that improvement start to go over the last part of the season here, but definitely not encouraging signs to show that that's coming anytime soon.
So I feel like we talk about trades a lot, and I think a lot of that is the reflection of this podcast, or us. Well, let me say it this way. For me, I've been doing this with you long enough that like, as long as the team has been rebuilding. So trades are a big part of rebuilding. Who are they trading out? Who can they bring in? All that kind of stuff. And I feel like when we talk about trades, especially like even earlier in this episode when we talked about trades, we were really talking about the state of the team and players in, players out, and things like that. But there are 2 players that I think, when it comes to talking about trade, have nothing to do with the state of the team. And I want to talk about those guys real quick. Mm-hmm. I'm not trying to drag everybody back into this, but I am very curious. Cam Fowler and John Gibson. You can argue that, or no, let me say it this way. You can clearly say Lucas Dostal has earned the right to be a full-time starter in the NHL. Moving on from Gibson allows him to become a starter. It is clear that they don't need John Gibson to take on the duties. Dostal played well last year. He's playing exceptional this year. If the team was performing even remotely better, he would be in the Vezina conversation.
Right.
The other one, however, is Cam Fowler. And Chad pointed this out on, I think, Twitter. And we're not going to hold that against him, but whatever. Does Drew Hellison coming in and playing so well light a fire under this front office to move on from Cam Fowler and ensure that when he comes back, they're still able to play these young players who are playing so well?
Yeah, I don't think anything has taken a step backwards in terms of the way we've played, with Cam Fowler being out of the lineup due to injury. Drew Hellison coming in and playing well certainly helps you make that decision. Cam Fowler's, the problem is it's not an easy one to move, and with his contract situation, and then trying to find a team that wants to take him and that can fit his salary under there. So I think that's the most complicated part about that. But there's going to be interest in him, and I think it, like you said, it certainly makes the decision and the conversation easier to have about moving him out, with Drew Hellison playing well, with Olin Zellweger playing well. Luneau struggling was a case to keep Fowler around a little bit longer, but then when you have other guys that step up and play well, it certainly makes it easier to have. Because obviously with Dumoulin, Minchkov, Lacombe, Hellison, Gudis, and Zellweger, and then you've got Vakanainen, that's 7 guys, if they're all playing the way they are, that you're comfortable with riding out the rest of the season and seeing how things go. They're young enough that you hope they can gain something from that experience as well. Gibson, I don't know how he's not traded to Colorado already, with Georgiev coming back at this point. I don't know how that hasn't already been done. Georgiev letting 4 goals on 8 shots. He got pulled tonight against Buffalo, and they came back and won that game because Wedgwood had 22 saves and didn't allow a goal for the rest of the game. So I'm sure that buys Colorado, in their eyes, some more time to not have to make a move. But the big story from that is another bad showing from a guy who's supposed to be their starting netminder in Georgiev. You've got John Gibson available. You've got ways to make it work cap-wise to bring him in. You've got him locked down for the next 3 years to help you with your window. He's playing well on a bad team. All the signs point to making the most sense for him to go there. And, of course, it's one that probably won't happen. I think John Gibson's a little bit easier to move because he's played well. He hasn't been injured over the last little bit here. And there are teams that are going to be assessing their goaltending situation in the next couple weeks here and deciding what they're going to do. And he has to be, I'd imagine, at the top of that list, right, of goaltenders that are available at this point in the season. So he's one I can see getting done a little bit quicker. But I imagine for Cam, that conversation is still ongoing. And when he comes back, he's going to be given a few more games to show to the rest of the teams out there that could be interested in him that he's still got it. But moving both of them is going to be difficult. I think we might only see one by the end of this year. And I think it'd be John Gibson, just because Lucas Dosso showed he can be a starter.
That's the other question, I guess, is, so I think it's easier to move Cam because he has a year less on his deal, which means other teams are on the books for longer, but it also means that if Anaheim wanted to retain, it had a less of an impact. And they could retain a high amount, and it would only be an issue for next year after this one.
Yeah.
I wonder, I think, a couple years ago it was David Savard, and he's the big name on the market. I think this year it's going to be Provorov. And what I'm going to be very curious to see is, does Cam Fowler get moved before or after Provorov? And it feels like it would be an after, like somebody would miss out on him and call about Cam. But the other thing I keep thinking about is Anaheim still has Brian Dumoulin at less than half the cap hit and an expiring. And if you move Brian Dumoulin, there's a very easy argument to say we're going to keep Cam for the rest of the season, trade him at the draft as an expiring contract. Mm-hmm. There is a very easy world to me where neither of these guys get traded this year. I think Cam Fowler is more likely to get traded.
Yeah, I mean, teams will overthink the goaltending situation and do what Colorado did and trade their young backup goaltender for a veteran and think that things are fixed. And then obviously he has one good game, and I'm sure they're feeling pretty good about themselves that they've fixed their whole situation. We'll see how that goes over the next 20 games or so. But there's only so many teams that are going to need and be interested in a goaltender throughout the season. there's not many of them. Like, Boston's having goaltending struggles, but they've put all their eggs in Swayman, and
Yeah.
whether he continues to struggle or not, that's what they're going to hold on to. Going team by team, the rest of the teams in the Atlantic seems to have their goaltending situation figured out. Most of the teams in the Metro, you could say, have that figured out. I think Carolina would be an interesting one to monitor just with Freddie Anderson's health and how that goes. They could get desperate because they are certainly in contention as one of the top teams in the league. Freddie Anderson is on the IR right now. If he comes back and immediately gets injured again and has to struggle with injuries for the rest of the season, Kachekhov's injured, and I'm not sure if they're super confident on him being their number one for an entire season. That could be one to look at. If Philly can stay in contention, we talked about that in the offseason. That could be an interesting one to look at because their goaltending situation isn't that great either.
All right, Eddie.
Yeah.
I fixed it.
What?
Here's what we do. John
boy.
Gibson and Mason McTavish for Jeremy Swayman.
Yeah.
Lucas Dostal for Mitch Marner.
Oh my God. Is that it?
Yeah.
Not moving Cam out either?
We'll move Cam, but that's just to move Cam. The other name, I think, because we were talking about veterans that could be available.
Mm-hmm.
Given the style that he plays and the close relationship he seems to have with Trevor Zegras, would you add Chris Kreider?
It depends on what it's going to cost. The Rangers aren't a team that's looking, I think, to just sell him to sell him. If you can, avoid having to send anything significant out the door, I don't hate it as a lateral move. Like if they're taking back one of their former guys and Strome or Vetrano back, and you're adding, something small to the rest of that to kind of just supplement the difference in player level there. But obviously Kreider makes significantly more, so I think there's something that can be had there. As the Rangers seem to be wanting to move on from reports from Chris Kreider, that if you can just kind of make a lateral move to shake things up there, I don't hate it. It does fall into the bucket I had earlier with the Carlson trade and those types of moves, and it doesn't really do much for the team, but
Would you do Fowler for Kreider?
yeah, why not?
Seems pretty lateral for both teams.
Yeah. Again,
Except for Chris Kreider's probably a better player than Cam Fowler by a fair bit.
Again, you're making that trade because you're comfortable with the dimension. It doesn't really make the Ducks significantly better.
But I think so. Here's the thing about that, right? This is one of those things that I think is a little too makes too much sense on paper that we can lose sight of something. It doesn't necessarily have to make the Ducks actively better in terms of level of general talent. But changing the dynamic and changing the presence and the composition of the team can have an effect. And if Chris Kreider is going to play that veteran, hard-nosed, Corey Perry style, falling on the goalie because I'm allergic to blue paint type of style, he's a boon to the power play.
No, he scores goals, and this team
You know
can't
what I
score
mean?
goals.
Yeah. I do think that there is something to be said of, maybe the overall talent, right, on like a Madden or an NHL. You're like, oh yeah, we went from an 80 to an 80. Big deal. Yeah, but what that 80 consists of now is fundamentally different. Chris Kreider plays a very different style of hockey than anybody on this team plays right now. He has a skill set and a track record that nobody on this team has right now. If his close personal relationship with Trevor Zegras helps get more out of Zegras, the idea of a, Kreider, Zegras, Terry line, that's pretty exciting. Like, there's a lot there to like.
Yeah, that one more than some of the others, I can make the argument for. And the Ducks are not a good team offensively. They need goal scorers. They need somebody who is a proven goal scorer. And Kreider scoring 52, 36, and 39 over the last couple seasons. He's got 10 goals in 21 games this year, which isn't terrible. He'd be put in a position to succeed on the Ducks, and he would certainly fill a hole where Cam Fowler's missed 13 games this year, and the Ducks have seemed okay without him on the blue line. So it does It does, and it can make the team better in that sense.
Yeah,
They've got enough on the blue line, and then adding a guy who has 30 goal upside to your team, regardless of the age, it does
potentially
help.
40 goal upside.
Yeah, it does. It does help. Fill a hole and fill a need for this team. So yeah, it's one to monitor because obviously he is a guy that is been reported that he could be moved, but I think he's got like significant trade protection. In that contract, so it'd have to be a place
100% be him being like, you know what, fuck it, how about I get out of the weather and I go live with my buddy, or I go play with my buddy, this stupid idiot kid who won't stop following me around New York in the off season.
Yeah, I do think that the Ducks have some leverage in having players that the Rangers are familiar with. The Rangers seem to like to add players they're familiar with.
It's because Jack Drury is actually a baseball player, not a hockey player. Or not Jack Drury, Chris Drury.
Stromer for Toronto could be interesting to them, and then some other pieces.
Toronto at 50% and Cam Fowler for Kreider and Lindgren.
Yeah,
that's interesting, man.
Yeah, I don't hate it. And I think the Rangers are going to do something like that to shake up their roster.
Do you think they really are? Because I've seen a lot of Rangers fans seem pretty skeptical of the idea that this team is actually going to do anything interesting and that they're just fucking bluffing. A lot of fans seem really mad about the Jacob Trouba stuff from over the summer. It's very funny.
I think they're getting to that point because they're at that stage where they have to start winning and they have to start making a run.
Mm-hmm.
They've got a lot of players that are getting older on their team. Their window is shrinking. They might be losing Shesterkin if they can't figure that situation out. So this is really a pivotal year for them to figure things out. I think if any year they were going to do it, it would be this year. So I put a little bit more stock into it than I would in any other year because I think there's so much riding on this year being the year that the Rangers can put it all together. So I think one of them, I think Kreider or Trouba. I think it's probably more likely that it's Chris Kreider than it is Jacob Trouba. But I think it's something that they're going to be working on. It's just they're both very tough deals to pull off. We talked about maybe Fowler and Gibson being tough to pull off. I think moving Chris Kreider or Jacob Trouba out of New York is a little bit tougher of a situation to work with because Cam and Gibby want to go or are open to moving. And the Ducks are open to moving them. I don't know if the situation's the same, right, with Kreider and Trouba because I'm sure they'd like to stay in New York and make a run with the Rangers. So then that situation becomes a lot tougher because of the trade protection both those players have and trying to move them out the door. So it'll be interesting to see. But yeah, if the Rangers don't do anything, it's more so I think they get handcuffed by the contracts and the protection that they've handed these players that they don't have to move if they don't want to.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that is fair. It's going to be interesting because it's another year where I feel like there's a lot of players and pieces that are all acting weird and stuff, right? The Caps are good, the Pens are bad, Nashville's terrible. It's all sorts of weird stuff. We apparently just saw another coach get hired possibly before he was fired. It's Gerard Gallant's still out there, Peter Laviolette, Mike Sullivan, Andrew Burnett. I doubt Jared Bednar, but there are coaches out there with some pedigree. You still already have Jay Woodcroft out there. You've got Bruce Boudreau. You got Claude Julien out there, I think. Oh, no, Claude Julien is on the bench in St. Louis. He's an assistant coach there. Mm-hmm. But, there are coaches out there and coaches that could become available. And at the end of the day, I think Anaheim has to ask the very real question is how much of a difference does changing coaches make? And it can make a big difference in the standings, or it can make a big difference in the room. And if it makes a big difference in the room, I don't know why they haven't done it already. I'm not saying the team has. like, I am not saying the team has quit on Greg Cronin or anything like that, or that there's mutiny or any of that shit. I'm not going there. But what I am saying is that we have heard some stuff about him being a taskmaster and him not being the most fun guy in the world, in a
Yeah.
sense that a lot of guys can find grating. If it's just not working as a personality fit, how what is the justification for sticking with it, given how little impact it seems to be having on the quality of play overall?
Yeah.
Do you risk burning bridges with players, burning players out, ruining relationships with players who should be a part of this core for the next 6, 7 years by keeping this guy around? Or do you just be like, no, man, like, we might have to move some of these guys, but like, ultimately, this team's improvement is going to come over the summer, and maybe we'll fire our coach then or something like that.
Yeah, it's at some point you've got to take the risk to do something. If you're not going to do that big shakeup through a trade, then the Ducks aren't above, and certainly it's firing their coach at this point based off where they are. I think expectations internally were probably higher for where they're sitting at this point. Sure, they'd love to be a few games above 500. I think it's going to take one bad stretch, and then we could see it happen. I don't think they're heavily invested in Cronin by any means, and reports don't just come out of anywhere, and they don't go unnoticed, I would imagine. So I think it's one that definitely has legs, and again, it's waiting for that situation to happen where it becomes almost impossible to continue moving forward with this guy. So we're not there yet, but I definitely think I think it's something that can come fairly quickly.
Is this season about Pat Verbeek? Because I think last
Yeah.
year you could say it was kind of about Cronin and it was kind of about the young guys, right? Minchikov, like in terms of the storylines emerging as the season went on. You know, last year it was like, okay, Greg Cronin's first year, what is he going to do? Get rid of Dallas Eakins, blah, 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 blah. But then it's like, oh, we've got Leo, we've got Piffle, we've got these two young players who are playing great. Leo's got the weird schedule for the building his strength up and, you know, being able to do all the stuff and not get injured and all that kind of stuff. Pavel's playing great, playing all over the ice, all that stuff. Now, this summer, he drafts number 3 Bennett Seneca. There are some other players on the draft where you could argue fit holes better, yada, yada, yada. Now, as the season's continuing to go on, it feels like maybe Greg Cronin isn't the answer. It feels like maybe there's some issues with Trevor Zegras. Maybe, you know, we already have the Cam Fowler stuff. We already have the John Gibson stuff, right? And it's just like, I wonder if by the end of the season, what we'll realize is that the protagonist of the season for the Anaheim Ducks was Pat Verbeek. When I think a lot of people were hoping it would be some of the younger players.
Yeah, I think it started shifting that way with the way the offseason went and the lack of any sort of movement and change in the offseason. It started to shift the conversation and a lot of the eyes towards Pat Verbeek, where he had a little bit of a grace period last year with the focus being on a few different other things. He doesn't have that this year. And a lot of the focus is rightfully so on him and what he's going to do now to change this team, whether that comes with anything that changes now is his decision, right? So that's where a lot of the focus comes. Is he going to fire the coach? Is he going to shake things up by making a trade? Is he going to, we've heard the reports, talked about them. Is he going to find a way to move John Gibson, Cam Fowler, both of them? What is he going to do with Trevor Zegras, and what is he going to do with some of these younger players who haven't taken steps forward? So the conversation in pretty much every avenue starts to shift towards a focus on Pat Verbeek, which as this season draws on and these situations continue not to happen, that focus is just going to keep getting put on him. The spotlight's going to get brighter and brighter because he's going to have to do something, and at this point he's the only one that can do something to turn things around or change things up, right? So I think it will be, no matter what happens by the end of this year. I think the main focus and the main spotlight is going to be firmly on Pat Verbeek when we look back on this season. And what did he do to change things and to turn the ship around?
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, man, I don't know. It's interesting. It's a really interesting time. I think, if you said the team had 10 wins through 23 games, I think I'd be pretty happy, but it hasn't felt it just hasn't felt like the process has worked to getting here. It feels so clearly a underperforming, underachieving team, or just a bad team if you want to look at it that way, being carried to a barely under 500 record, or barely above 500 record, I guess, based on
Yeah.
points, even though that's fucking stupid. It's wins, not points. Whatever. By points percentage, at just over 500 team by one goalie playing great. John Gibson had the appendectomy, so he was out, but he wasn't injured, right? He was just recovering from surgery. It's not quite the same thing as him getting like a playing injury.
Yeah.
So I think it's just like, yeah, what is he going to do? I like Dumoulin, I like Fabry. I think both of them have come in and been perfectly fine and perfectly solid. I would sign both of them to 1-year contract extensions tomorrow. But in order to do that, you've got to move some more guys out, right? You've got to get Cam out of there. You probably have to move on from Vetrano. Maybe you have to move on from Strome. Like, there are questions, right? Because at this point, Alex Killorn isn't getting traded. There's nobody who's taken that deal on. Maybe you got to move some of those guys out. But at this point, there's just like, I don't think this team is one free agency summer away.
No.
So
Nope, not barring
it's gonna
some
be
of
a
these
big question.
guys actually taking those steps forward over the rest of the season, over the last 59 games of the year. See what we hoped from these is Leo Carlson and Carter Gauthier and Zegras and McTavish and Minchikov and all of them significantly improving over the last stretch of the season here. Barring that, certainly they aren't one free agency window on the right moves in and out from being competitive and making a push for the playoffs, which it's just all on Pat Verbeek right now and what he's going to do. And this, the concerning part of that is this offseason was supposed to be the off season where something happens, right? Something big happens. It doesn't have to be, again, a Mitch Marner level acquisition, but something happened, right? Something, either big names going out or a big name coming in, and we didn't see any of that. He, without saying he was going to get it done, he kind of said he was going to get it done, right? Like, there was a lot of promise around that this is what the team needs, and he's going to do what he can to make that happen. And then when nothing happens, you've got to take the brunt of that. And he certainly did, from a lot of us and a lot of fans out there. And the early conversations at the end of the offseason were what he didn't do. And as this season goes on and the team struggles, that's just going to get amplified more and more. And the focus is going to continue to be put on him and what he's going to do now after not doing anything this last offseason. And you can't go 0 for 2 and not doing anything in the offseason and sitting there and waiting, and then not doing anything in the middle of the season and sitting there waiting until next offseason, because you're not going to really buy yourself that many favors if you continue to wait and wait and wait for the perfect move, the perfect deal to come along, right? Like, they're nearing that point where they have to do something, anything, to shake things up, because clearly it's not working the way it's going.
Yeah, I would just really like to know what Pat Verbeek thinks of what's going on right now. I would really love to get an idea of where he's at, because I think there are a lot of different directions to go from here. I think a lot of them are fair and valid, but I think they all require active decision making. And to this point, he's been fairly passive, and that's fine to an extent. There's virtue to that, right? Don't overreact. Don't get crazy, right? Don't overextend yourself and be like, oh, fine, Steven Stamkos, we'll give you $10 million.
Right.
Don't make unforced errors. Don't make mistakes. I get all that. But there's a difference between a mistake and a swing. Risk is inherent. The question is, what is the opposite risk of not doing anything? What is the opposite risk of becoming again, this is becoming old Columbus, or let's look at it this way, becoming Winnipeg, right? Where you
Yeah.
never really do anything until you're absolutely forced to. The most exciting trade you've made in a long time is swapping underwhelming picks from the same draft with Columbus.
Yeah.
And it's like, that doesn't really work. And then you trade PLD and all that stuff. But now you get here and you're like, yeah, I mean, this is a roster of pieces with pedigree and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's fucking Connor Hellebuck in a dream, which is not dissimilar to where we're at now. And like, that's not where this team wants to be. Obviously, to have the kind of consistent level, high level success in the regular season that Winnipeg has had is great. And that's something to aspire to in general. The Ducks just went through that decade of their own. But what you're trying to do is build a Stanley Cup champion. That is the point of all this: is to build a team that can win a Stanley Cup championship. And right now, based on what this says, neither this roster nor this coach seems capable of doing that. And if you believe in one or the other, you need to make changes to whatever. If you believe in one, you need to make changes to the other.
Yeah.
Either this coach is the right choice and these players aren't getting it done for him, so we need to make big swings and big changes, or this coach isn't getting enough out of this roster and getting the most out of this roster, and there's another level for this roster to reach that another coach is going to have to find. You have to pick one.
I feel like the easiest step to go next is to do that, is to see what you can get with another coach, the right coach that you think can take not just another interim, but the right guy who comes available that you think is the guy that can take this team to the next level. Go out, get him, see what happens, see if he comes in, because it's very possible it's both, right? But you can't know that until you try and
Change
fix
one of them. Yeah.
So you bring the new coach in, and if things don't get better, or if you see minor improvement but you still see some struggles, then you can say, okay, well, now we've got to fix things on the players' side, and you shake things up. And I do think it is a bit of both. I do. I don't think Cronin's the guy, but I don't think another coach is going to come in here and all of a sudden think the Ducks are going to start winning, 2 of every 3 games. Like, I just don't think they're going to turn it around and be a competitive team. I think they, better system, a better way of playing, better control of the locker room, that they certainly can be better and play better and give a little bit more support to their netminders, but it's going to have to come also with a decision to move certain guys out and make significant moves on the player side of things. So I do think it's a lot easier to start with the coach first than it is to start moving guys out to fit Greg Cronin and his way he wants to play, and then the Greg Cronin situation still doesn't work out. And then you've got to go out and get a new coach, and then you've got to go back and reassess those players under the new coach anyway, right? So doing it backwards and doing the player side of things first just feels like you could find yourself in this perpetual loop of having to just redo everything anyway. So I think they should, at this point, have a good understanding whether they think Cronin's the guy. I think we've gotten, at least in my opinion, enough to see he isn't. And now it's just waiting for that move to happen and the right guy to come available.
I think it's easy to forget how young this roster. Old-ass Isaac Lundestrom, who feels like he's been on this team for 30 years, is 25 years old.
Yeah.
Zegras is still only 23. McTavish is 22. Cutter's 21. Leo is 20. Like,
Minchikov and Zellweger are under 22, I'm pretty sure. So
Minchikov and Zelli are both 21. Like, there is natural room and expectation of growth and improvement, but this is also the time where you really need your coach to be getting more out of these guys to grow into their future selves. You want these guys taking on roles that are a little too big for them right now. And right now, it feels like it's just a roster of guys.
Yeah, for sure. No.
And I think, I really would like to see something from this roster. And again, I really have no issue with a name only big trade. Like, I would have no problem being like, oh, it's not working out. Here's fucking Urho Vakanainen and fucking Ryan Strome and a 3rd round pick, and you give us, what's his name? Steven Stamkos. Going out and trading for Chris Kreider, going out and trading for Erik Karlsson. Like, I'm open to those. I think those moves in their own way have value, so long as they are not viewed as being problem solvers.
Mm-hmm.
but rather being able for this team to make steps in changing the composition of the roster, changing the composition of the locker room, changing the composition of playing styles and skills. I think the biggest argument against Erik Karlsson is like we got a lot of puck moving guys who create offense from the blue line.
Yeah.
So, that's why I think, Trouba or Kreider, someone like that makes a lot of sense. Obviously, the Trouba underlying numbers aren't great. And, defensively, it's more about reputation than anything at this time. But I think, the physicality and stuff like that, him and Gudas being out there pretty much 45 minutes a night isn't, that's not fun for anybody on the other team.
No. Yeah, I'm fine with those moves. I should say this, that as long as it's not mortgaging anything that has potential for the Ducks. Like, I'm not fine moving for those guys if it means some Mason McTavish or Jackson Lacombe have to go out the door to make that happen. But if it's lateral...
You wouldn't trade Jackson Lacombe for Erik Karlsson?
I don't think so, no.
Okay, that's fair.
As long as you're keeping those guys and it's more lateral, where guys you're going to move anyway, like if a Vetrano's going out the door, a Strome or something like that, a Fowler or a Gibson, I'm fine with that because you're saying, well, we'd rather not make this team worse and bring in picks or prospects. They feel like they're beyond that stage, or it just doesn't make sense for them to do that at this point to get significantly worse. We still want to shake things up, so let's do a lateral move. We'll bring in, we'll ship a guy out the door and bring in a guy who can immediately replace him and see if, maybe he's a different style, plays a different way, just a different outlook that he can come in, shake things up, build some chemistry with some of these guys and get things going. So I'm fine with that. If that's the case, if you're kind of making a lateral move and you're just foregoing picks or prospects you could get for a Vetrano or for a Strome or whatever, and you're just bringing in another player that you could hope has a different impact on the roster, I'm okay with that. I've come around to that idea. But if once it starts involving some of the young players going out the door to make those moves happen, I'm not sure I'm for it there.
The Ducks have the worst expected goals for percentage at 5v5 with 43.3%.
That tracks.
God, man, they just... Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how much else more there really is to say right now. I just, I think, like we've said, I think ultimately this season is going to be about Pat Verbeek and where he's at, and, nobody is going to force him into anything. He's going to react to the roster, but I do have to wonder, what he sees when he looks at this team. Even if it's only 5 or 6 minutes with Alexis Downey, I would love to hear from him.
Yeah. An actual candid response.
Yeah, I mean, look, it would be an interview with a Ducks team member, like Ducks employee, right? So, I'm not expecting Alexis Downey to, grill him, but to just sit there and ask him the questions. This is where the team is at. How do you feel? And then, see what lies he gives us, right? See what cliches he uses. I think as much as it can be frustrating that executives and hockeymen and all that kind of stuff speak in certain cliches and things like that, we've learned over time what they mean and what they can mean and to decipher them a little bit and get an idea of where this team is at. The truth of the matter is the market isn't big enough that we're ever going to get, a bunch of guys coming and talking about how crazy everything is getting and behind the scenes drama, because there's just not that level of intrigue for the Ducks. It's not going to be like it is with New York, right, where we're hearing all about all this behind the scenes stuff, and Vince Trocheck is taking shots at Mika Zibanejad in the press, and Chris Kreider is yelling at everybody to fucking buckle up, and all this crazy nonsense. And then it's like, all this time Igor Shesterkin still wants $14 billion, and it's just like, yeah, man, that's the Rangers, baby. I'm here for it to get weird and messy over there, but that's not going to happen here. That's just not the way the organization has run historically, and it's not the way the market functions. So, just a couple of minutes with him to just know what kind of shit he's still trying to sell me would be nice, because I do want to know what he sees when he watches this team play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just be nice to hear something at this point, but I don't think it's something we're unfortunately going to get anytime soon. We don't get that luxury that we get in soccer of the manager having to step up and have a press conference before every game and have
Right.
to answer questions, right? The GMs can go pretty under the radar for the majority of the season and not have to really answer any questions at all. Um, Even the coaches to some extent, but especially the GMs get to kind of run things from behind the scenes and not have to answer any questions until the off season really, and when we get closer to the draft where they start getting put on TV and in those situations a little bit more, which is unfortunate because again we're sitting here with all these speculations trying to figure out what's going on and what's going to be next, and all it takes is 5 minutes sitting down somebody with the GM and just asking generic questions and just seeing what the responses are. I mean, some answers is as much bullshit or press written as they could be. At least there's something that you can draw on, right? There's some truth in the words behind it, as much as they might be glossed over. That you can start to pull at least some ideas from and what the direction is supposed to be.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I just think, that all in all, this season, while there are disappointments, is about par for the course for the rebuild, right? Like we did like we said at the beginning of the episode, on the preview episode, we laid out a case for how this team could surprise you, right?
Yep.
We were very clear about what we felt it would take and who it would take it from, and to this point that hasn't happened. And now it's about why, right? Is this a situation where everything's actually clicking and nothing's actually happening? Well, the underlying numbers don't seem to suggest so. So the argument then about why the situation is actually moving in the correct direction, improving, is about all the stuff behind the scenes and the team buying into the fundamentals and the team buying into the system and the coach having the attention and the buy-in of everybody. And there seems to be some stories to suggest that that's not necessarily the case. Again, it's hard to know how much of it is this, that, or the other. One player can create a narrative pretty quickly with one well-positioned leak or one little tip to a friend, right? It has to be said that some of the stuff about Cronin being a hard ass and kind of losing the room is from Paul Bissonnette and Ryan Whitney, right?
And
So
Eli Labushkin.
yeah,
So,
but
yeah.
Again, Ilya Labushkin, it was tough. He's not a bad guy. He's not a
Yeah.
bad coach. So this feels a little bit different now, where now this is really like, okay, this is the second year in a row, and this guy's making it real hard to fucking come to work every day.
Yeah.
So, again, credibility, that's up to, everyone to decide how much they trust those two guys themselves. I think because it feels like they do have good relationships with a couple of the guys on the team, Petrano, Zegra, stuff like that, it makes it easy to see where this stuff is coming from, and it gives it some credibility. But at the same time, it's also easy to see it being someone who maybe has an axe to grind or something like that. So, like, it's just one of those things. I'll be very, very curious to see what happens. Cam's going to come back, and they're going to have to send Drew Hellison back down.
Yeah.
Do they just say, hey, man, we appreciate it, you look great, we just can't fit you up here? Or do they fucking make something happen? Move your Hovakanainen. There's no reason, given the number of guys playing, there's no reason for him to be on this roster. You have 15 left shot defensemen on your 70. Move him, bring up another righty. Even if he's not playing every game, it gives you some variety. It gives you some balance.
I mean, Vakanainen has played 5 games at this point, so
That's what I'm saying. Like, move him. Move him for a pick. I think he is a very good bottom pair defenseman. He can be a very stable player for a good team for a long time. I think there's a lot of value there for a team that gets a hold of him. But he doesn't have a ton of value to this team right now beyond being apparently very good at just not playing every day, which is a skill set and can't be ignored.
Yeah.
Well, there's no reason not to give that opportunity to Drew Hellison, who's 3 years younger, 3.5 years younger.
Mm-hmm.
Move some of these guys out, man. Just start making some things happen here. Try to get people an idea of what we're headed for,
Yeah, I mean, Hellison at this point has...
Brian Fabry, like...
Yeah, Hellison's proven at this point, even with his play in the AHL, that he is getting to the point where he needs to play on a regular basis, right? Like he
Yeah.
played well enough down there in San Diego that he was the first name on the call-up sheet to replace Cam Fowler when Cam Fowler went out, and then he has been nothing. He's done nothing to provide any doubt that he belongs at the NHL level so far. I mean, again, this isn't a guy who's going to continue to put up a point every other game, but he's got 4 points in 8 games. That's great, but even outside of that, the way he's played, he's been comfortable, right? He showed that he belongs at this level. That's great for the Ducks to have a right shot defenseman that they can add to Gudas to actually have in the roster on a nightly basis. Obviously, you can't, the ideal situation is moving Cam as soon as you possibly can, but that's not an easy one to do. But yeah, then the next one after that is, at this stage, is Vakanainen. Like, again, sat in the press box for 18 games so far this season. He's played 5. Like, you're sitting on an asset there that now you've got a guy you can move up and down freely from the AHL to the NHL in Helleson if you have to, until you figure something out with Cam. There's your out to get rid of Vakanainen and get something in return, and at least do something, at least kickstart what could be potential future moves down the road, and moving Cam and stirring things up. So I don't know. We'll see. Now we're all kind of waiting on pins and needles now to what the first thing Pat Verbeek does, because things just haven't been good enough so far.
Yeah, no, 100%. Couldn't agree with you more. It's a waiting game now. You said it best. I don't know how much repeating I really need to do right here.
Yeah, no, and I think that probably wraps it up. Like, I don't know if you have anything else, but it's a bit of a downer one, but that's the way things have gone. We talked about it, like you said, at the beginning of the season, and this could be a scenario where this team is getting bailed out by their goaltenders again, and not a lot has really happened, and it was almost kind of like the worst case scenario in a sense. Certainly things record-wise could be worse, but this is certainly in one of the scenarios you didn't want to see happen when we talked about them at the beginning of the season. Is there's been no notable improvement, and the goaltending is bailing this team out again. That was one of the situations, because we've seen it before, right? It's just not one of those things we wanted to have to see happen again, and here we are 20 plus games in, 23 games in, and the Ducks are riding their goaltenders again into the ground.
Yeah, just is what it is. I mean, there's nothing else to really say about it. It's a different version of the same song, because the team in front of them is young and not old, right? It's team heading into their window as a team on the backside of it. But fundamentally, this team is where it's been the last few years, which hasn't been good enough, and it's been fine. It's been understandable. The team needed to rebuild. There's good players on this team. There's good players on the roster and in the pipeline. There's a lot to be excited about. It is worth pointing out that nothing about the state of the play on ice seems to reflect that.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, real quick, a couple of things before we get out of here. We should have probably talked about this already. Do you buy into any of this Trevor Zegras is a sad little boy who's having his heart broken in the NHL right now nonsense? Or, no. I shouldn't say nonsense, narrative.
No, I don't think so. It's coming from a handful of people that I don't necessarily look to first for reports on stuff like this, so I'm not buying it fully. Will I put some stock into the fact that if the team was going to look at moving a guy that they feel things aren't working out with, is Zegras maybe one of the more likely guys to do, like a kind of, this is a struggling guy we still believe has a lot of talent, you want to trade him for your struggling guy we still believe has a lot of talent? That's something I could certainly say is possible, but the whole narrative around he's not happy and this and that, I know I'm not buying it.
Yeah, it's weird, because it can't, like, there was some stuff about it during one of the games where he scored and he didn't really celebrate, and like it was noticeable. He did, look pretty like fucking just like whatever. But like the season sucks, and there does seem to be something to me for the idea of him being later in his career, him understanding that he could be on the trading block, him wanting to play well. Mm-hmm. I think he cares a lot. I think it's very clear that he cares. I think the amount of work that he has clearly put into the defensive side of the game, which I guess if you want to say is a sign of Cronin getting through to anybody, it's that.
Yeah.
If the cost of that is taking the fucking light out of his eyes, then we need to have a conversation. I don't think the cost of that should be hindering his natural creativity, which I don't feel like we've seen as much of this year.
Yeah.
That kind of zany creativity, almost fucking Looney Tune style passing that he had. But I also think, he's a dude who like gets where he's at narratively in his career, and he's focusing on playing well and trying to do everything right and prove that he belongs to be on this team or that he belongs to be on a great team.
Yep.
If he does get moved. So, I'm very about it. But, like I said, he had the one game where he didn't and everybody freaked out. And then the next game he had a goal and he fucking went wild. And it was felt like he had heard a little bit. Like, look, he strikes me as someone who reads the comments, right?
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
Especially as someone who plays with flair and cockiness. Like, he's certainly he strikes me as very JJ Redick-y, right? Where there's a version of him that very much is just like, oh, we're okay. Well, let's keep going. Let's do this. Like, fuck you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, great, have fun. But it did feel like that celebration was very aware of some of the conversation around him. And
yep, for sure.
I think that's the bummer of it all is I don't care. I don't want him to be miserable. Like, I don't care if the rumor is true or false in so much as the rumor is concerned. I just hate when, like, a player becomes hyper aware of it and it's like, oh, this sucks. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
He's a 23-year-old kid, man. I don't want to have to hear him talking about a bunch of fucking 30 and 40-year-old dudes being like, fucking get down, play defense. You fucking flippy puck Instagram douche.
Well,
Like, yeah, calm down, bro.
Yeah, we're parallels of that in the other team we support with Garnacho and Manchester United, and not celebrating a goal he scored because of things that the fans are saying off the pitch. It's a very similar situation to that. And yeah, I mean, you hope, again, I know a lot of it's true, but I mean, they're going to go through this, and they're players, and they're growing up in a time where they're heavily connected, and they're going to be seeing all this stuff, a lot of stuff that,
it's their ecosystem.
And, one game it affects them, and maybe, they get over it, and beyond that it doesn't affect them, right? So I don't think it's anything to look into too much. This was a body language thing, like we've said with John Gibson, where he just doesn't look interested. We've had long stretches where that's been the case with him. Then maybe you can start to buy into it a little bit, but certainly I think Zegras on most nights looks like he's having a lot of fun out there, so I wouldn't be concerned with it, at least at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that sounds right. All right, now we need to go to you as our senior Canadian correspondent.
Okay.
2 questions. 1, are you personally offended that Beckett Seneca is not on the World Junior roster?
Yeah, there's a lot of guys that didn't make that roster.
Chuck Perrick, those are the 3 that stood out to me.
Iginla didn't make it either. Michael Misa, who's leading the OHL in scoring, he didn't make it. So there's a lot of names who didn't make it, but the team on paper, the 32 guys they invited to the World Junior camp, it's lacking like those types of players. They obviously had an approach that they wanted to make, and the type of team they wanted to bring, and that meant leaving some of the big names off. I feel like they wanted Hockey Canada has a tendency to overthink a lot of things, and it feels like they just wanted to go with no one man is better than the team approach. Yeah. And they left a lot of the high profile big name guys behind. And kind of just brought those guys with them. So I'm disappointed, man. Like, it's funny, he comes off of his best game of the season, and the next day he finds out he's not going to the invite camp. He gets 4 goals and 2 assists, and then he's not going. And his line mate and teammate and Callum Ritchie is going. So Ritchie for sure certainly deserves to go, but
good player.
It's not to say that the rest of the guys on that roster don't deserve to go, but there some very big names left off, and I think it's just going to be disappointing on a fan level as well, not being able to see him there at that tournament, or at least get a chance to make that team, because he certainly is talented enough to do so. But hey, this gives him time to develop and continue his season in the OHL and show that without Ritchie there that he can take a step forward and be the number 1 guy. So I'll be excited to watch what he does with Oshawa while that's going on, and prove everybody wrong on why he should have been there.
Second question is our senior Canadian correspondent. How excited are you to root for a national team where Jordan Binnington is the starting goaltender?
Well, is this the Four Nations tournament?
Yeah.
So it might be Joey Decord now because he got approval to
Oh,
represent
did he?
Canada. Yeah, so
I didn't hear that he had gotten the
can
approval yet.
he can represent Canada, but he can't represent Switzerland. Um, and then if he wants to, if he
Well, you
won't
can't
be-
represent Switzerland if you choose a side, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's funny how they always put in there that he could still represent the USA if he got the call for the Olympics, like he's gonna get the call over fucking Hellebuck and Ottinger and all these guys. So.
Wayman, Dunko.
Yeah, I think it's so weird that for this tournament he can, but for like actual international tournaments like the Olympics or anything like that he can't. So I don't really care. Like our goaltending situation is awful right now. That
Yeah, the fact that you guys are like praying to God that you can get
yeah.
an exemption for Joey Decord, I think says a lot.
yeah. Yeah, it's so. I mean, it is what it is. I probably won't watch. I don't know. Maybe
You
I will.
fucking loser. You
I
gotta
probably
watch.
will
What are you gonna
because
not watch?
it's
Come on.
But
You're not gonna watch. It's gonna be a Crosby, McKinnon, fucking Marchand line. You're gonna watch.
Yeah.
Don't sit here and lie to me, Eddie.
I don't think
You're not
it's
gonna
gonna
watch
go
it.
well for
Hale,
Canada.
McCarr,
And
Shea
honestly,
Theodore
like
power
I
play.
would hate to see him do well, because it would be like, okay, well, we finally have a goaltender that is gonna do well for Canada after the loss of like Carey Price and Luongo and whatever. And he's a guy we can't even have in the tournaments that matter anyway. So we're gonna have to figure this out when it comes to the Olympics and World Cup of Hockey, if it comes back again, and anything, that we're gonna have to find out some way to get another guy in there, because other than that, it's fucking Jordan Binnington who's gonna be the guy for
Hill,
us.
Stuart Skinner.
So. Yeah, much.
Is Dustin Wolf American or Canadian?
He's American. Oh no, I think he's American.
God, dude, you guys don't make any goalies anymore. What the fuck?
No, I guess
Haven't
we
made a
have
good goalie in 10 years.
some kid for this year's draft. So of him being in the Olympics, this is like 5-6 years down the road. That's supposed to go top 15. Carter
Sure.
George, I think it is, or something.
That sounds like BS. Sounds like a fake person.
Yeah, I mean, the hope for a while was it was gonna be Carter Hart, and obviously that didn't pan out. So I don't know who. There's really nobody up and coming either, right? Like there's no good young Canadian goaltenders that are out there right now. So
Let me double check about Senor Dustin Wolf.
I'm fairly certain.
I think he's American. Yeah. Oh, holy shit! He's from Gilroy, California.
Oh, there you go.
I have family that lived in Gilroy. I used to go to Gilroy. Like, not all the time, but a fair number of times I've been to Gilroy for, like, family gatherings and stuff.
It's one of the few Americans.
That's crazy!
make
Dustin
the-
Wolf. Damn.
Yeah.
Home of the Garlic Festival.
I mean, yeah,
That's
our
crazy.
hopes. I mean, Logan Thompson, I guess, is another option for a goaltender, but yeah, it's not looking good. And pretty much almost everybody else has somebody, right? Like you guys obviously do. Russia does if they were competing. Finland has Saros. Maybe Sweden is in.
Yeah, they got Markstrom, they got Allmark. Like, they got guys
Certainly
they can
better
go to.
situation than than we're in for sure. Kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel, but yeah,
Yeah. Oof.
it's
You
desperate
think Roberto
times.
Luongo wants to play?
He might be the best option we have available. At this
Bobby,
point.
put the pads on, baby. Let's go.
Jeez. Yeah, it's sad times. I don't know. Well, Canada's waiting for that next elite level goaltender. I mean, we've been spoiled over the last few years with the likes of Fleury and Price and Luongo, but
We cannot put Fleury in that same category if it's all the same to you.
no, but certainly he was a top netminder at a time, and I would rather have Fleury in his prime than Joey Decord or Jordan Binnington at right now. So I can throw him in that conversation
fair.
when we're comparing him to those guys. So
That's
yeah,
fair.
I mean, listen, we've been spoiled for years and years in having not one but multiple goaltenders that are elite level in the NHL. So it's karma coming back now that we don't have one, but we still have the best roster on paper that
Don't know that
to
that's
make a
true.
difference here. So
Pretty sure the goalie is part of the roster.
beyond the goalie, we've
Pretty
got.
sure the goalie is part of the roster.
But you want to talk about Hockey Canada overthinking things with the World Junior stuff, not bringing in Evan Bouchard because they want some. I guess they don't trust their goaltenders enough that they're going to bring Colton Parayko instead, and
Which
have
insane.
Yeah. All right.
What a choice. Incredible.
And I like Colton Parayko, don't get me wrong, but to bring him over Evan Bouchard is just insane. And again, it's what you get with, like, they're overthinking. Like, listen, they feel like they're going to need some support in front, so they're not going to bring Evan Bouchard, and they're going to throw all the offense onto Cale Makar's shoulders to do everything.
Well, Shea Theodore's still there. They're going to probably be able to maybe bring Dougie Hamilton.
Yeah, but again, are you bringing Dougie Hamilton over Evan Bouchard? Yeah, like, what are we talking about at this point? Like,
I mean, I think it's closer than you're saying.
I
think Dougie Hamilton's been good longer than Evan Bouchard's been good.
Sure, but I mean, we're talking about even this year, Evan Bouchard's been excellent. So, yeah, that's
He's been good for
an
18 months. Evan Bouchard has been very, very good for 18 months. That's all.
Enough.
If we're honest, that's all it is. He's been really good for 18 months.
I think what he's done over that period for me is enough for him to make it. I mean, 82.
You don't want to take Mackenzie Weegar?
I don't even hate that. I would take Weegar over Parayko.
Sure.
I don't mind him as being the third pairing right shot defenseman. He can play, power play if you need him to. He can play penalty. He can play all situations. He's done that for Florida and for Calgary. So I don't mind bringing him either. Again, and it has not like it's not that I like Colton Parayko a lot. I think he has value on that team, but not over some of the guys we're leaving and would be leaving at home. Like, it's Canada. There's going to be very good players that don't get called to play for the team, but we're leaving some of our best players at home to overthink the roster. That becomes an issue. Guys that you would think would normally be no-brainers, if you're leaving them at home, then that's a problem.
Yeah. I do think of all the, offensive defensemen, I do think Bouchard is the one who's the easiest to leave home.
So, Four Nation is Canada, U.S., Sweden, Finland, right?
Yeah, the thing we did a whole draft for.
Yeah, I thought so, yeah. I am interested to see Finland in their roster. I'm liking what they could potentially put together.
It's going to be a bunch of dudes, bunch of guys.
Bunch of dudes, but the top end is nice.
Yep.
Top end of that roster is nice. It'll be interesting to see.
All right, before we get out of here, there's only one last thing that's important to point out, and that is to remind everybody that on June 12th at Rogers Arena, Sunday, Father's Day of 2025, Kendrick Lamar will be having a concert on Father's Day in Canada, in Toronto. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is why
That's amazing.
he's the best in the game right now. He has just so clearly decided that he wanted to be the number one guy in the game, and he is kicking the shit out of Aubrey right now to do it. And ladies and gentlemen, we love to see it.
The level of trolling with that to schedule your concert for Father's Day in Toronto is amazing.
Bro, he's gonna play Meet. A friend of mine, Scott, made this comment. He's like, dude, he's gonna play Meet the Grams 3 hours straight.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. And the best part about it, it's in close. I mean, it's in the summer basically. Rogers Center. Nobody plays at Rogers Center. It's not a concert venue. Are you sure it's Rogers Center?
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it's a stadium tour.
So if it's not because the Leafs play in it's not ACC anymore. What the fuck is it called? Scotiabank now, I guess it is. If it's Rogers Center,
Arena used to be the Skydome, right?
Yeah, you're right. It's Rogers Center. It's where the Jays play.
Rogers. Yeah.
Yeah. So nobody plays there. There aren't concerts there. So the whole point of doing that, it's open dome. You can open the roof on that thing and just blast Meet the Grams super fucking loud, and all of Toronto can hear. That's amazing because it's right downtown too. That's amazing. That is some thought process going.
Tour date at Blue Jays Stadium.
That's amazing. Wow. That's a conscious choice because again, from my knowledge, there aren't ever concerts there. There aren't ever like it doesn't happen there. Like it's strictly Scotiabank Arena.
Go. He is the
That's
best
amazing.
right now. He has made it. Oh man, I love it.
That's one I might have to figure out a way to get to.
You should, dude.
Yeah.
That would be a hell of a concert to go to.
Yeah, that'll be wild. That'll be wild for sure. Sit in the well, there's a hotel that is in that building.
Yes.
Where you can just sit on your balcony in your hotel room and watch Kendrick Lamar con. That would be great.
Now we're cooking.
I'm sure those are already booked for Father's Day 2020. What 2026 you said? Or
2025.
2025. Yeah.
Basically, after the Super Bowl, he's going to go on tour.
When I guarantee you, the moment that got announced, boom, every room in that place was booked up. So.
Yeah, I believe it. Sounds right.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, let's get the hell out of here.
Yeah.
Relatively short one tonight.
Hopefully we can hop back on soon with some news. Coach getting fired or something along those lines. Trade, something. Pat Verbeek,
Yeah.
listen in and make something happen, my guy. Let's go.
Yeah, come on, buddy. Just help us out a little bit.
Yeah.
Just, we're just sending you a little you up text right now. Make sure you're still alive.
Yeah, we just need to fire our hockey version of Eric Ten Hag and bring in our hockey version of Ruben Amron, and then we're good.
Hey, that's the part of it that makes it hard to not want to change the coach, is how big of a difference it's making for United already. That's why I'm just like, let's fucking go. I don't even care.
Yeah. It'd be a lot easier if Greg Cronin was bald and Dutch, then we could.
I mean, he's basically bald. He's got 4 hairs on top of his head.
Yeah.
Bless his heart.
Yeah, and then we just need to bring in a young Portuguese guy to come in.
That
Well,
hockey
those
hotbed
exist
of
in
Portugal.
hockey, right? Yeah. Yeah. You need a young, slick Swedish manager or something to
Now
come
we're
in.
cooking.
Yeah.
Can we get Owen Nolan to come out of retirement and just come coach?
Bring Hank to come in and leave his job at TNT and come coach.
Now we're cooking.
Yeah. There
Talk
we go.
about putting guys in front of a goalie. Just, you will
Just
block
get
every
Tamu.
shot.
Just get Tamu.
No,
We've
don't
talked
do
about
that.
it
I don't
before.
want to
Just
do that.
get
Let's not do
Tamu.
that.
Get Tamu in as
That
coach.
is the Ollie pick right there. That is
Tamu-
Ollie.
Tamu
If
is
you bring in
coach and-
Tamu to coach that team, that is such an Ollie move.
Paul is assistant coach.
Yeah, Paul is rude. Ollie
Yeah.
is Tamu. Oh my god, it
Yeah.
is. That's fucking infuriating.
Yeah, they'll bring Brad Rooch in too. Have him doing something there.
I'd rather have Eric Cantona coach the Ducks than Tamu Solani.
Rooch's coaching penalty kill or something. So. Oh, man.
All right, that's it.
All right. Well, sorry we are back so late, guys, but we're hoping to do it more often. Hopefully something happens soon. We can get back and jump on and give it a talk. But if not, we'll give it another handful of games here or so, and we'll hop back on and give our thoughts on it. Hopefully something turns around at this point, but I don't know. I have no hope. It's a great way to end the podcast, but I'm not holding out hope without any significant changes that anything turns around anytime soon. Game tomorrow.
Fuck hate you. I don't even have to say him. That's the end of it.
Yeah.
Get out
All
of
right.
here.
See you guys.
Bye, everybody.